Thanks for tuning in to TTRC 103.5, where we make teachers' futures brighter. We're here with Cohort 1, and oh man, do we have some interesting topics for you today for our teacher listeners out there. Alex, you want to start us with the first topic?
Sure, Kaylee, I'd love to. I want to bring up the point of why we give our students assessments. According to the ASCD.org, assessments like quizzes, tests, and writing assignments are the best approaches that a teacher can administer because they are things that can be administered on a regular basis to see how their students are doing. I know there's a lot of controversy against test taking, but there are different forms of assessments aside the typical black and white hard copy test that we love and that we'd love to share with you today.
Alex, weren't we just discussing that with your mother, who's been teaching special education for over 10 years? She mentioned some students have not properly been assessed on a regular basis. She gave us an example of a child who has been sent to her classroom a few days ago to focus on the introduction of a topic he was not understanding. The teacher didn't realize he didn't understand the basics of the concept she had already been teaching for a week and a half. One of the topics he didn't understand at the beginning of the lesson, when in reality that could have been avoided if the teacher would have modified her lesson.
Yep, you're so right, Valerie, which leads us right into another topic, where you as a teacher need to give your students a sufficient amount of time to learn each lesson. Alex, what are some ways we can share with our teacher listeners out there on how a teacher can determine a student's weaknesses and strengths, while still giving the student an appropriate amount of time on the lesson?
Well, Kaylee D., there's a 5th grade teacher who works for Humble ISD I know. Her name is Miss Barron. Something I really like that she does is she likes to give her students non-graded assessments and group projects that make sure she has a great relationship with them. That makes it easy for her to see when they are failing and when they're not and why.
Okay guys, we've covered some pretty good ground, but let's talk about the huge elephant in the room.
Where?
Fitzgerald, you're so funny. I'm talking about the assessment so many people are against nowadays. So I think we should talk about the different techniques that can be used aside from typical Scantron multiple choice tests.
Wait, I think I'll tackle this one. So I was reading up on some new ideas on how teachers can monitor students' learning. I found some great stuff from educationnorthwest.org. Some ideas teachers may want to write down. The first is to walk around the classroom while students are doing worksheets. Note the errors, but be sure to point out any good work. Constructive criticism is key. Ask your students how they interpreted the lesson. We've got to remember we all think differently. And here's a fun one. Allow students to be mobile when performing tasks. A great quick assessment for the kiddos. One extremely important thing is to always listen to your students. Remember, when a student asks you questions, just know that the students are struggling to understand or need a simple clarification. This lets you know that your students are actively engaged in your lessons.
You bet. Those are all great key points to remember while planning your lessons. Learning how your student learns is fundamental. Earlier we discussed Miss Barron, and she said she had a great point. You have to get to know your students to know if the letter grade they received is a good representation of what they actually know. That's why, like Valerie said, it's good to know other ways to assess students because not all students demonstrate their knowledge the best on tests. They may know it during those fun chalkboard races, but get freaked out when a test comes. We also need to keep in mind that students have a life outside of school. In turn, sometimes this also plays a huge effect on how a student learns things or where the student's true focus is. School may be the last thing on the student's mind if home life is rough. That's why it is important to know the best route to take if a student's grades begin to slip based on the student's situation.
So then that big question comes up from parents that I always get. Why is it important for teachers to employ a variety of assessments? Here's what I usually tell them according to Ms. Anderson. Everyone can't perform at their true level with the same test. Formal and informal are very big in the classroom, especially when you have students with exceptionalities. You can have a student that can easily pass a multiple choice test and some students that cannot, but can demonstrate their knowledge with projects. You have to use multiple forms of assessment so that all students have the same ability to demonstrate their skills.
You're right on target. So while a teacher is monitoring a student's learning, they need to be sure to set high standards for their students that are achievable, hold students accountable for their work, establish clear expectations on the tasks that they want their students to achieve, ensure that they are regularly checking up on how the student is doing, scoring and recording all classwork, and providing students with feedback. All of this is so important because it helps create a roadmap for students who know what to do. Their strengths and weaknesses become apparent along the way, but the students are able to learn about their mistakes and correct any errors. When a teacher provides encouragement along the way, it drives attention to what the student has achieved, making them feel so proud.
But can't you use what you learned about your students to promote collaboration? And knowing their weaknesses and strengths help plan your future lessons? Kaylee D., how do you think using what you learned promotes collaboration?
It is important for the teachers to know her classroom and to know who works well with who. This will take trial and error, but knowing your students' strengths and weaknesses, it will be easier. To promote collaboration, according to Concordia University in Portland, Oregon said, sometimes all students need is a little extra push to collaborate with others. That push can be an incentive in the form of extra credit or special stickers that students can redeem for prizes at the end of the semester. Making collaboration a mandatory part of the classroom curriculum can help students work together better. Collaboration also helps introverted students break out of their shell and become comfortable working with others.
I agree 100%. What about you, Kaylee H.?
ASCD.org put it in great and said, if a teacher is researching fewer than half of the students in the class, the teacher's method of instruction needs to improve. The teachers need this kind of evidence to help target their instructional improvement efforts. I mean, results are more feedback on your teaching than the student's IQ. Using data from the assessments can help you if you're reaching for your students and then using your planned future lessons.
That's why it's important for teachers to ask open-ended questions about a topic at hand.
Yep, that allows for more classroom diversity to come into the classroom. We all learn things from each other.
Our last topic is how we as teachers can teach our students to question assumptions. According to Ms. Anderson, a part of learning is to view things from different points of view. You need different perspectives to really have a well-rounded education. Challenge assumption isn't to hurt feelings, it's to bring awareness to light. We need to teach our students the difference of being rude and respectful.
So true, I hope to teach.
Thank you for listening. I hope you teachers and future teachers have learned a lot from us this afternoon. Tune in tomorrow for a great discussion on do's and do nots when it comes to building your bulletin boards. This was Cohort 1 with TTRC 103.5, Making Teachers' Futures Brighter.